Hello, my name's Ali Rhind. I'm going to show you step by step how to make a hooky or a proggy mat. There's lots of other names for them too that you might have heard. Proggy, poked, pegged, cliquey, cluty, stobby, tab, rag, tacky. Depends where you come from, what you call them. But there's basically two different sorts. One which is shaggy, and like a long pile, and a smooth one. But the way we set it all up and start off is pretty similar for both of them. So first of all, we use hessian or sacking. It's quite an open weave, not too close, because we need that for the wool to go through. So if it's very fine, it'll tend to break. So something which is quite open weave. People used to use old sugar sacks that they bought at the co-op or on the corner and open them out. But we can buy it just by the yard now. When you cut hessian, it tends to fray and go in funny directions. So in order to get a nice straight line, I tend to pull a thread. So I'm just going to pull this out here. I'm just using the side of some scissors and ease it up like that. And then pull it right the way through the whole thing. If it breaks, don't worry, you can just catch it and find it further down. And when I pull that out, that gives me a nice straight along the grain to cut from. So now, this is where I want my edge to be. I'm going to cut along where I've pulled that thread. And that means that's nice and straight. So this one's going to be for a hooky mat. So as well as cutting my edges to get it all straight, I've also pulled threads for where's going to be the edge of my finished mat. And where I've pulled the threads, I'm marking along with a felt pen. That tells me what the edge is. And I've left a couple of inches which I've hemmed. Now I've used a sewing machine, but you don't have to. If you haven't got a sewing machine, don't worry, just turn it under by hand and just tack it quite well. And that will be, when you've finished it, that will turn under. So you work up to that edge and we'll turn that under afterwards and stitch it down. So this is going to be the edge of our actual mat or wall hanging or cushion cover or whatever it is you're making. Right, so we've hemmed all the way round and I've marked the edge. That's going to be the finished edge of the piece of work. So the hemming, when we've finished it, that'll turn under, so that's on the front, like that. I've worked out what I want to do in my sketch pad here. Quite a simple, bold design. So what I'll do is I'll draw on first of all in chalk, and when I'm happy with it, I'll go over it with felt pen. If I make a mistake, which of course we all do, I can use a damp cloth or sponge or something to rub it out. Okay. I think I'm quite happy with that, so I'm going to go over it with felt pen now. This is quite a simple design, but if you were doing something quite complicated, you might want to scale it all up, and that helps you. And you do a little grid over the top of your design, and that helps you work out where you are. And if you're doing something complicated where it matters, it helps you keep it all in the right place so you don't veer off dreadfully. But for something like this, we can usually just work by eye. I might put some more detail on once I've got started, but as far as I'm concerned for now, that's enough for me to decide where I'm going to put my colours. Sometimes, in fact quite often, I would do a coloured painting to give me an idea of what colours are going to go where. And sometimes I'll just really, it might be the starting point might be the colours you've got, or you know, if I'm dyeing something specially, because I use a lot of old blankets and cut them into smaller pieces and dye them, and that's a good way of getting lots of really good solid wool with some lovely colours. Traditionally, of course, people used old jumpers and whatever they had, and I think most of the things I use are recycled, but to get the colours I want, you can't always find, if you're wanting, say, a particular thing like a bright yellow or something, it's quite hard to come across a bright yellow jumper when you need one, so you do sometimes need to dye things. Right, so we're all ready to sew into our frame. So there's two parts to a frame. These parts have got webbing, carpet webbing, upholstery webbing on them, and that's sort of nailed on or stapled on. That's part of the frame, so that just stays there. And we stitch the piece of prepared hessian that we've drawn our design on into here, onto these two long pieces with the webbing, and these are our side struts, and I'll show you how we're going to use those in a minute. First of all, we've got to do some sewing. So this is the long sides are going to go onto the webbing, and I'm going to put it roughly in the centre, and I'll just put a couple of pins in just to hold it in the right place. And it's quite important that you put it on like this, so you're going to be stitching, over stitching, edge to edge, like that. So there's one pin there, and another pin there. And the thread we use, because eventually once we've got going and the frame's all stretched, this part's under quite a bit of strain, so you need to use quite strong thread, like a button thread or something like that, or linen thread, or whatever you can get hold of, or the strongest thread you've got, and use it double if you haven't got anything like that. But that will stay on all the time that we're making the piece. So I'm right-handed, so I tend to start and work right to left. And at the end, make sure that's really on well, because if you haven't got a proper knot, and if you haven't gone right to the end, it'll tend to pull away there. So that's nice and strong. And we're over stitching it. Reasonably close together, but it's not fine sewing, just something nice and even and sturdy. So I've stitched in the two sides now, right the way along, and I've made sure when I've stitched in the other side it's exactly opposite. So it's exactly the same distance from the end there and there. That means that when the whole thing's finished, it's not going to be like a parallelogram. Okay, so we don't need to have the whole thing showing when we've got it framed. What we're going to do is we're going to stretch it. So I'm going to wind one side in till it's about 18 inches apart, or something like that, just something so it's comfortable. And then I'm going to put the two side slots in here and one up here. Now these are doing a job, they're helping us stretch it. So I've got my pegs ready, I've got 4 pegs, and I'm going to put one in here, one in the other side opposite, so I'll count the number of holes, so that's 3 down there. And now stand it up, and then this helps me get it nice and tight down this way. First of all, that's not tight first, but we're going to check the other side as well. See if we can get it really tight. It's still quite loose, so I'll try again, see if I can get it a bit tighter. Yeah, I can get onto the next one. I'll try and see if I can get it on the next one here as well. There. So now it's nice and taut and I'm ready to start my hooking. Right, so the frame's all stretched and we're ready. I'm resting it on a couple of trestles. You probably won't have trestles, so don't worry. What you could have it on one side, you could have it on the table in the back of a chair or something like that. Basically, what you need is some space underneath and some space on the top, so you don't do it on a table or anything, okay? So I've got some material. Now this is nice thick blanket that I've dyed, wool, and this is an old jumper. So we're going to have a go at using both of these, and I'll explain how you cut them. So if you're using wool that's woven rather than stretchy, then you're just cutting some nice straight. You need sharp scissors, sharp as you can get. And we're cutting long strips. And these are about, I think they're about 1.5 centimetres, maybe not quite that much. In old money they're about 5/8 of an inch. It was often the children's job to cut up the strips and the clippings in the past. So then we've got a couple ready to go. So this is some knitted fabric. This is a jumper. So it's important that you cut the things the right way. Can you see there's a little line in it where the knit is? And we want to cut the strips up that way, not across the way. It's really important to do this. So I'm going to follow that line. If it's very thick material, you might cut it very slightly narrower. If it's very thin, just slightly wider, but that's about the right size, okay? And it does make a difference. The neater you cut and the more accurate you are, the easier it will be to work. And for hooky, knitted material, like jumpers, are just great, especially woolen jumpers that maybe been in a bit too much of a hot wash and got a bit felted, so they're no good for wearing really. They're great because they've got that bit of stretch in them. So I've got some yellow and some purple ready to work. I'll show you how they go in. So there we've got our strips there. And you see when you've got knit material, if you pull it, it almost naturally goes around to a little round like that, and that's great if you've got that. Right, I've got my hook, and the hook part here is facing up towards me. And I'm right-handed, so I work right to left. If you're left-handed, you'll work left to right. But you always have the hook facing up towards you, and I hold it like this. So it's almost like an extension of my arm, really. So when I go down like that, see I make quite a big hole in the hessian, and I sort of slide it back there so that the hook's not going to catch on the hessian. If I kind of go like that too much, it'll catch. Or if I don't make a big enough hole, it'll catch. So don't worry, because what happens is the hessian will just open up, and then as soon as you've got your wool in, it'll close back again round about it. So you're going right the way down on that tapered bit to the wide, thick bit. It makes a nice big hole. When you slide it back, it's not going to catch. So one hand lives underneath. That's my left. For me, that's my left hand, and that's going to hold the material underneath. So when I go down with my hook and make a hole like this, see I'm going down, I'm catching the end underneath and pulling it up. I'm just leaving that to start with. Don't worry about it, we'll sort that out later. And then this time I go along about 2 strands and make another hole, and I bring up a series of little loops. And what I'm doing really is I'm creating a rhythm. My hand underneath is holding the material in front of where I'm going. So it's just ready there, and I suppose it's providing a bit of tension for me to pull against. If I pull up too high like that, then I can just ease it back down to the right height. If I don't pull up high enough, then it'll just drop back down easily. So you need to come up high enough so it can sort of belly out a little bit. But not too high so it looks lumpy. I'll just ease that back down again. With this piece, I'm nearly coming to the end, so what I'll do is I'll bring that last bit up to the top like that. Now I've got two ends here. Don't worry about them, because in a minute I'm going to start the next one in the same hole as this one here. Go back down, bring an end up to the top and carry on. That was in the same hole as the other one finished in. So what we'll do, I'll carry on in a minute, but what we'll do with these bits eventually, when you've filled in round about, what you do with these is you just cut them off at the same height as the loops, and then when you've finished, filled in the bits round about, they just sort of disappear. I'll show you what my hand underneath's doing. So underneath, it's these fingers here are sort of pulling it, and that's giving me, it's like a little break. So can you see that stretch there? It's nice and taut. So when I go underneath to catch the end, it'll catch underneath there. And these fingers, which are underneath, are pinching it. So when I go down underneath, it's like fishing really. That hook is going to go underneath here and bring that up like that. Okay, so I've done one row, and I'm going to come down this way and across. So you're always working, because I'm right-handed, always working right to left. So I'd come down and over. If this was a circle, as I came back round, I'd start going left to right and it would start to get messy. So always stop. If you realise you're going left to right and you're right-handed, stop there, bring the end up to the top and start again. I'm following my line down here. So you can get a bit of speed up once you've got the hang of it. It'll be a little bit messy just when you first start, and then you'll get a rhythm going. And you'll get a lot faster and neater as you go on. But that's all there is to it, so it's very simple. Now I'm going to go into that one there, and now I'll jump up to the next row. I'm just doing it comfortably alongside. This is a straight line, but of course you can do any shapes. So if you'd drawn something more fiddly, if you'd drawn an animal or something, you'd follow the shape of whatever it was that you'd drawn. So again, you don't need to fill in straight lines, it just happens to be, because I'm showing you how to do it, probably easier to see what you're doing with a straight line. But something that's quite particular, you just follow the shape. So this is the other one, this is Proggy or Proddy or Clippy, whatever you want to call it. With the other one we worked from the front, so with Hooky, what you saw was what you get, but with Proggy you work from the back. So this is the back of the Proggy, and the other side underneath is the shaggy part. First of all, we need to cut our clippings. Now this kind, it's better if it's not too stretchy, so something which is, like blanket, which is quite firm and thick, is great. And I'm cutting a long strip, which this is about 8 centimetres here, or about 3 and a bit inches if you work in inches. And then I'm going to cut my clippings. You can hear the nice sharp scissors, that does make it easier. You don't need a lot of special equipment, and you can make your progger out of an old clothes peg. But sharp scissors really help. Right, so I've got my clippings ready. This is one I've already started, so the design's drawn on here, you can see that. And here are some proggers. So you can see they're made out of all sorts. Here's one made out of a peg, so that's something you could do yourself really quite easily. All you need to do is to take one leg off the dolly peg, sharpen it a bit with a knife, so you've got a nice smooth taper and not too sharp at the end, and just finish it with sandpaper, and that'll work fine. So that's your progger. This one's made out of a deer's antler that somebody gave me. And this one's out of an old key. So people made them out of whatever you had. So Proggy's nice and easy to make. We'll do that. This time I'm holding it like a pen. And this middle finger here, that's an important part of the way we do this. So I go over to a little pile of clippings that I've cut and pick it up onto the tool like that. This time I slide the finger up and I make a hole, quite a big hole, and slide it back down so just the corner here is above the hole that I've just made. And then I poke it through. My other hand is underneath, ready to catch that corner and pull it down. This time it's further apart, so there's about 4 strands here, not 2. It's about 1/4 inch or less than a centimetre, but not a lot less. Okay. Make another hole this time, and I flip it over with my tool, and again I'm using this middle finger. It's helping hold the corner. Take the corner to that hole and poke that through. Give that end a tug underneath, and I'm pulling both ends down together. So underneath, which remember that's the front, is the same length. So I've pulled those 2 down underneath, and the same hole I go into with the next piece and poke that corner through, pull it down. Carrying on, carrying on like that. Again, close by. When you're first starting out, there are some things that people quite often do. One of them is to make not a very big hole, and that makes it really hard to get thick material through if you've only done a little tiddly hole. So push it quite way down. You're not damaging the hessian at all. That's quite a nice big hole there. And the other thing people tend to do is they'll, rather than poking the corner, they'll poke the middle. And that's really difficult. It's nothing to get hold of. And remember, it's the ends you're wanting to pull. So always poke the corner, make a big hole, poke the corner, and pull it down from underneath. And you pull it just short of halfway, go along, make your next hole about 1/4 inch or just less than a centimetre away, flip it over, get hold of that other corner, poke that through. Now when I'm tugging those 2 together underneath, that means that they're the same length underneath, and that's what we want. So that's progging. Normally you wouldn't trim something till it was completely finished, but because I haven't quite finished this and I want to show you how to do it, we're going to trim the middle part, which is a bit that's all done here, just to show you how to do it. So I'm going to turn it over, which remember that will be the other side will be the front, and then give you a little bit of a haircut to show you how we do that. Right, we're just going to trim this little bit in the middle that bit's all done, so it's safe. When you trim it, you're not taking the whole thing down, you're just taking any unevenness off. I won't trim these bits here because it's still got spaces in between, so they're not standing up and they're not nice and solid like this. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to put my hand underneath and lift it up slightly like that. And then that means that it just makes it clear to me where there's little bits of unevenness. So that's what you would do. It's obviously a good idea to do it somewhere, not where there's a fitted carpet, because all the little bits will stick to it. So if you've got a kitchen or somewhere where there's a tiled floor or something, it's much easier to clear up afterwards. And then take off all the little bits and carry on. I know this looks really uneven here, but I don't want to do that bit yet. But you can see what I mean. So you're not really taking the whole thing down, you're just taking those little unevenness down. And it makes the pattern show up more. So the colours blend with Proggy. It's quite different. It's with Hooky, you can see more definite lines, but with Proggy it's a bit like the difference between an impressionist painting and a much more realist type of painting. So use those, the way the colours merge and things can be quite a nice way blending them when you're doing Proggy. If this bit was all finished and you had an edge to do, what you'd need to do there would be hold that edge up vertically like that before we start trimming, so we don't take too much off. If we let it go down like that and then take some down, we can end up too short at the edge, and that will make it a bit baldy and a bit vulnerable, those edges. Okay. So this is the back of a wall hanging, a Proggy one. And you remember when I was explaining about the edges that we turned under for Proggy, for Hooky rather, with these ones, what you can do is you can do a wider hem, about that wide, and then do 2 rows of Proggy through the double thickness. It's a little bit awkward, but you can see what happens here is then you don't have any finishing to do afterwards. You go right up to the edge through that double thickness all the way around, and that holds it in place. So it's quite a nice, neat way of finishing. And because the edges of the Proggy flop round, you can't see that edge either. That's why you can't go through that double thickness with Hooky, because it would be cockly and wouldn't look neat. But it's fine with Proggy. This one's a wall hanging. So in order to hang it, what I've done here is I've made a long calico sleeve, which is stitched here right the way through and along here. And actually I machined that on before I finished I left a piece showing and machined that on there, so it's nice and solid. And I've got a wooden batten which is going through with a little hole at either end. With some twine or something. So on the back of Proggy you can really see how you've got a very definite pattern which I've drawn and then worked to, and lots of colours and things, soft shades mixed, but it's quite a definite thing on this side, but when you turn it over it's much softer. Okay, so with Hooky, that's where we do turn our edges under. So that's the hemmed part, and we've turned it under, and I've actually pressed it. So I used it like a damp tea towel and pressed on both sides and pressed those edges under and just pinned it when I stitched it so that it's not going to pull it over too far. So those edges are stitched down, and again, because this is hanging rather than for the floor, I've put a sleeve at the top and some doweling, which is going to mean it can be hung. And so the end of the doweling just sticks out slightly from the sleeve, and that means you can put a hook in the wall there and hang it from there, and it won't show from the front. Okay, so those edges we try and keep the fold nice and neat like that.